The Tampa Bay Rays are no longer homeless, and they're all set to play at the Yankees Steinbrenner Field in 2025. So let's get y'all the why and, of course, how it all happened with our New York Post sports reporter, Dan Martin. Dan, great news for baseball, man, that two teams could come together. First and foremost, how you doing, my man? Thanks for hopping on with
I'm
us.
good, Brandon. How you doing?
All right, so the news broke Thursday, but can you kind of take us deeper into the details of how this collaboration between division rivals came about, and were there any other stadiums or venues that the Rays were looking at?
Yeah, Brandon. I mean, it's a very odd situation, obviously, from the get-go, from the time that the hurricane ripped off the top of the Tropicana Field, and they realized they weren't going to be able to play there at least for 2025. They had to find a new home. So yeah, they looked at a couple different places, uh, mostly Steinbrenner Field in Tampa, and where the Phillies play in Clearwater, their spring training facility as well. So those are the two main candidates. Just in terms of keeping the team local for the most part, it's about half an hour away from St. Petersburg. And then it just became a process with Major League Baseball and the Yankees of all teams, because they're pretty fierce rivals, the Yankees and the Rays, going back here for the last 10 or 12 years. But Hal Steinbrenner, the Yankees owner, has lived in Tampa for most of his adult life, and the Rays owner Stu Steinberg said he credited Hal Steinbrenner with kind of bringing this all together, putting rivalries and baseball aside and just kind of doing what was right for the sport and for the community. So yeah, it's maybe strange bedfellows, the Rays and the Yankees, but it came together, and we'll see how it works out. I mean, certainly from a baseball standpoint, it's probably going to be okay, but there's a lot of logistics still to be determined because this just came through yesterday, and they don't have a ton of time to get it ready.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, let's hats off or tip the cat to Hal for that, for reaching out and getting this thing done. You talk about the logistics outside of only holding what 11,000 and having no roof. How is this going to change game day routines for both like the Rays and whoever it is that they play?
Well, the Yankees did a lot of renovations prior to this happening a couple of years ago at Steinbrenner Field, tens of millions of dollars. So by spring training slash minor league standards, Steinbrenner Field is a pretty good setup. It's not the same as a major league stadium, but I think that players have said that it'll be okay. They're going to have to go through with it with the MLB, with the Players Association, just to make sure things are up to par and as good as they can be. Look, it's not going to be the same as a major league ballpark. Tropicana Field, frankly, wasn't state of the art in terms of the facility itself. It's been around for 30 or 40 years. So it's not like they're leaving a perfect setup. The biggest difference, obviously, is that Tropicana Field did have a roof, and the Steinbrenner Field does not. And while that's a big deal anywhere in this day and age, it's even bigger in Florida in the summertime where it rains. It seems like every day, and even if it's not raining, it's 100 degrees. So that's why they play spring training down there, and then they come up here and play the regular season. So it's gonna be rough. I had one coach from another American League team tell me yesterday that they're not going to be able to take batting practice because it's going to be just too oppressive, or it's going to be raining. So there's going to be a lot of little quirky things that teams are going to have to prepare for. And then once they get there, I'm sure there's going to be other things that weren't even on people's radar that's going to come up. But the Blue Jays during the COVID year of 2020, when there were travel restrictions in Canada, they played the first 2 months, I think, or maybe a month of the season at their spring training facility in Dunedin, Florida, which isn't far away, and then moved to Buffalo. So these kind of things have been done. It's far from ideal, but considering the situation the Rays were in, they didn't have a ton of great choices.
You kind of mentioned how both MLB PA and MLB are working to ensure major league standards are met for player safety. What are these standards that we're talking about, Dan?
Well, it's just simple stuff like making sure that the turf or the grass is good enough to play on. The locker rooms are in good shape. The clubhouses are in good shape. So that process is really starting today. I think, and baseball just went through this a few months ago, really, with the A's moving from Oakland to Sacramento. Sacramento is a AAA minor league team, So there, it's a bigger stadium, but it's still a minor league ballpark that the A's are probably going to play in for the next 3 years until they move to Las Vegas. So there's a lot of uh, uphold in baseball right now, especially in the American League, where you're going to have two teams at least for 2025 playing in minor league ballparks. So yeah, the union's going to have to keep an eye on how the ballparks are kept up, and just to make sure that everything is done as well as it can be, because it's really not going to be the same as playing in Yankee Stadium or Tropicana Field or Citi Field, because they just don't have the amenities that those major league ballparks do. But for a year in Tampa, they're going to have to make do.
It's almost like in the NHL when the Arizona Coyotes had to play at Arizona State, a 5,000 person arena as opposed to what they were used to playing into. But at the end of the day in sports, the show must go on. So let's talk fiscally. How does this affect the Rays both fiscally and when it comes to wooing in and bringing in free agents?
I guess the good news on that, Brandon, is that they don't really draw in the first place. They average about 16,000 fans as it is in St. Petersburg at the Tropicana Field. Uh, Steinbrenner Field holds about 11,000. So what's interesting about that area is that even though it's only about a half hour apart, it's kind of a pain in the neck to get from Tampa to St. Pete. So they've been talking about building a new stadium in St. Petersburg, which they're in the process of getting the funding for. But there had been talk of moving to Tampa because it just makes more sense in terms of where the community actually, where the people are. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of a crowd they draw for this year. But they haven't drawn a lot of people in St. Pete, and they are notoriously thrifty, let's say, in terms of their payroll. So they haven't usually been on the upper tier of the free agent market, and that figures to be the case again this year. Because if you're looking for certainly a 1 year deal, you're not going to want to prove yourself again at a single A ballpark and not knowing where you're going to be. And if you want to sign a longer term deal, there's no guarantee that the Tropicana Field is going to be ready in 26. So the organization is kind of in a bit of a flux right now. Their baseball people are very smart. They contend seemingly almost every year, despite the low payroll. So maybe they will again. But this is a curveball that they've never seen before. So from a Yankee perspective, it might actually be good news. They have to play, I think, 6 games there, 4 in April and 2 in August. But the Rays are going to be there for 81 games, and I can see that being a disadvantage for them. So if that's an AL East rival that's going to have to face more adversity than a typical team, maybe that goes in the Yankees' favor. So we'll see how it plays out, but it's going to be pretty wild to see a Major League Baseball game played at Steinbrenner Field across the street, literally from Raymond James Stadium, where the Buccaneers play. So it's not far away geographically, but it's a much different world where they're going, and we'll see how they cope with it.
We got the A's playing at a AAA baseball stadium. We got the Rays playing at Steinbrenner Field. This is baseball 2025. Hey, Dan, great job on the article. Great job being on top of this, man, and thanks for hopping on with us.
Thanks, Brandon.